When I was trained to become a firefighter and an EMT, very little time was devoted to educating us about job-related stress, burnout, trauma, sleep disruptions, and mental health. We didn't know that there were life-saving resources, resilience strategies, and support groups that help first responders to cope with anxiety, depression, and stress. It's a huge understatement to say that first responder mental health is in crisis. Fire, police, and EMS are professions where more die by their own hands than by the hazards of the job. And research shows that up to a quarter of public safety dispatchers have symptoms of PTSD and depression. In this silent worldwide crisis, first responders are quietly suffering due to stigmas around mental health services and lack of awareness about vital resources that are available to assist them. We can help the helpers. Welcome to Responder Resilience, a panel of experts sharing their wisdom and experience from the front lines of first responder health and wellness. I'm David Dachinger, retired fire lieutenant and EMT with over 20 years as a leader in emergency services. I'm also a stage 4 cancer survivor, and for the past 7 years, along with my wife Tamara, we've developed and shared stress reduction tools for mind-body wellness.
I'm Tamara Green, author and co-founder of Loving Meditations. For the past 30 years, I've used my experience as a psychotherapist and meditation teacher to create safe and loving spaces of support, helping people to access ease and joy during the most challenging times of their lives.
Welcome to the first edition of Responder Resilience. I am David.
And I'm Tamara, and we are co-founders of Loving Meditations.
And we are super excited to bring you this panel of experts. It's an international panel, and we're going to start bringing them to you right now. Dr. Stacy Raymond has been a clinical psychologist in Ridgefield, Connecticut for 22 years, and she's a trauma specialist with half her practice dedicated to first responders and military veterans. Dr. Raymond helps clients overcome anxiety, panic, and PTSD. Her father is a Marine and a retired police officer. She is an approved consultant in EMDR, that stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. And it's a highly effective form of psychotherapy that quickly helps people heal from their worst memories. In July, amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Raymond created Responder Wellness, Inc. It's a nonprofit charity for EMS, police, and fire who are all deeply affected in their own ways, and they were feeling overwhelmed and underappreciated. Responder Wellness, Inc. provides safety equipment and wellness services for first responders with a mission to keep them safe, healthy, both physically and mentally. Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you, David and Tamara. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. And Nick Poprosky is an award-winning paramedic field provider and educator with over 18 years of experience working in municipal, fire-based, commercial, and volunteer EMS systems. A graduate of Connecticut Fire Academy recruit program, Nick served as a career firefighter paramedic for Ridgefield Fire Department from 2010 to 2020. Currently, Nick is the director of EMS education for Vintech Management Services in Torrington, Connecticut, serves on the board of directors for the Connecticut Association of Paramedics and EMTs, CAPE, and routinely presents on the topic of PTSD with the Fairfield County Trauma Response Team. Hello, Nick.
Thank you guys for having me.
Welcome.
So good to have you.
And we have Jordy Heath. Jordy started as a paramedic in 1999. In his 22-year career, he's seen and witnessed more than most people will see in a lifetime. He's also a supervisor for the Emergency Medical Assistance Team of Ontario, Canada, and deploys to large-scale provincial emergencies. In 2020, he was away for almost 4 months supporting the COVID-19 response. Jordy's the co-founder of Love Your Life to Death and the I Just Showed Up movement, which supports individuals and organizations planning for life, grief, and death. Jordy's also the recipient of Emergency Medical Services Exemplary Service Medal, one of the highest honors bestowed upon paramedics in Canada. Welcome, Jordy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hello, Jordy. So good to have all of you amazing experts on the Resilience Summit. Thank you for being here.
And it's exciting that this is an international panel.
Right? Yeah. So we are going to make this about all of North America, not just the United States
That's
today.
right.
But I think there's so much common ground that it really doesn't matter where we're doing this job. It's we're kind of having the same experiences and the same challenges. And speaking of challenges, just so we can shift into a nice space of calm and quiet, we'd like to invite Stacy to lead us in a meditation, which is the 4 elements.
Sure. I just want to give credit where credit is due. A psychologist in Israel created this. His name is Elon Shapiro. It's the 4 elements exercise or meditation, and it's really to help people ground and become more calm and comfortable in their own skin. So it's earth, air, water, and fire. Those are the 4 elements. So let's start with earth. Just notice your contact points with where you're sitting, perhaps where your arms are resting, where your feet and your bottom, the back of your body. Where are you connected to the earth? If you're sitting in a chair, know that the chair is firmly planted on the floor. You are connected to the earth. Air. Shift your attention to your abdomen and control your breathing with 3 or 4 seconds in, 3 or 4 seconds out. As you inhale, your belly is going to expand away from your spine. As you exhale, your belly is going to relax back towards your spine. If you can do 3 or 4 seconds, and you continue with this for a minute or so whenever you are stressed, that is ideal. Air is the most important element to master. The next element is water. Focus on your mouth and the level of moisture in your mouth. Try to generate a little bit more moisture there. Maybe think about something delicious that you enjoy eating. It could be something salty. It could be something sweet. Maybe you imagine cutting a lemon in half and licking 1/2 of the lemon. You might want to take a sip of water and just moisten your mouth. The reason we want to do that is we want to activate rest and digest. That is the opposite of fight or flight. You could also put a mint or a piece of gum in your mouth in order to generate some more saliva production. That is the water element. And then we move on to the fire element. So I'm going to ask all of you, now that you're in a comfortable state of mind, to fire up your imagination and think of a place where you feel calm. Popular choices are a place in nature. For example, the beach. Maybe it's a walk in the woods with your dog. Some people feel most comfortable in their house, undisturbed, alone, maybe relaxing in a favorite chair or just sitting in bed and listening to some music. Wherever you are in your calm place, I want you to use all of your senses to investigate that place. What does it look like? Notice that. What sounds might you hear or not hear? Maybe it's quiet. What might you smell? If you're out in nature, certainly there are certain scents that are very pleasant. Wherever you're sitting or standing or walking, just notice the sensation of that. Maybe if you're outside, you feel the sun against your face, or you feel a slight breeze. Maybe you feel the leaves crunching under your feet. Immerse yourself, use all of your senses as you explore this calm place. And just stay there. Just notice that. And notice the calm feeling of being there. And when I do this exercise, or when I instruct people on it, I ask them to stay there as long as they can. And so if you could stay there for a few minutes, I know we're not going to do that because we're just, giving this as an example, as an exercise. But, the longer that the more times that you practice this, the longer you'll be able to stay in that relaxed state. So that's it.
It's always good to start a program off with some centering, grounding, stabilizing practice like that. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I was tasting an apricot.
Oh yeah, right.
Tasted really good.
It's sweet and tart. I like the lemon. Whenever I even say it, I start salivating.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's unconditioned at this point. So
Yeah, that was cool.
Great. Well, let's dive into our topics. You're all experts in your own right in responder resilience, and so let's talk about some of the elements that go into health and wellness for first responders. Stacy, first responders accumulate stress that gets built up over time. Some of us have had careers that span decades. And we find it difficult to open up to anyone, let alone our peers or even our family. So how do you find somebody that you trust to share your story? And what does that look like? Is it a group? Is it a one-on-one? What are the different possibilities?
Well, I think it's typically best handled one-on-one, at least in the state of Connecticut. As of 2019, peer support teams have been mandated for both fire and police departments. And so that makes it sort of easily accessible, right there. If someone is having a hard time, whether it's with a difficult call or it's a marital issue or financial issue, an addiction issue, they can talk to a peer and it's supposed to remain confidential. I do think first responders have a much easier time speaking to one another than picking up the phone and calling a therapist because of the stigma that's attached to that. There are more and more peer support groups for first responders. I have a colleague, Bonnie Rumley, and myself run one. We've been running it since November of 2018. It's right now on Zoom because of the pandemic, but we're going to go back to an in-person format with a Zoom option. And that has been so well attended because, again, it's confidential. It's first responders from any form of first responder, police, fire, EMS. We've had 911 dispatchers. We've had animal control, correction officers, and many of them share the same frustrations. And it's a place, it's a forum where people can share and be open and realize that they're not alone with their struggle. So. And I think more and more peer support groups like that are cropping up. So that's my suggestion.
And Nick, do you find, I think you attend one of these groups, don't you, Nick? And do you find that it really is helpful, the peer support groups?
Absolutely. I'm a huge supporter of peer support, and my experience with first responder peer support is actually my second experience with peer support in general. My first experience with peer support actually came in the form, my wife dealt with a bout of postpartum depression. And in our search for resources and support during that process, I found a lot of dead ends. But what I did find is a number for this group called PSI, Postpartum Support International. You call, and the phones are answered by a volunteer. Now, the volunteers are all postpartum survivors. And within, you want to talk about talking to someone who's credible. When you talk to a survivor, in the first 2 minutes, the woman I was talking to was answering or basically finishing my sentences as far as what we were experiencing. And, the suggestions that she was able to come up with were priceless. But what was more important than, try this, talk to this person, look for these services. What was even more important than that was that I was able to instantly, in a very desperate time, connect with someone who sincerely understood what I was going through and felt so moved by their own experience that they're volunteering to answer phone calls and talk to people who are dealing with the same struggles. So when I had heard about the peer support group that the Fairfield County Trauma Response Team was running, it really made sense to me that if peer support worked when my family was dealing with postpartum depression, that I should give it a chance. And my experience has been very similar with the peer support group in Connecticut.
Wow, fantastic. And Jordy, is there anything like that in Ontario, Canada?
There are a number of organizations like that. And I think one of the most important things that Nick had mentioned was you need to speak to somebody that has been in a similar situation. We have twins, which are healthy and now 16, but at the time when they were little, we were looking for advice on how to have 2 babies at once, because that was not something that we were familiar with. And we were given all kinds of advice from somebody that does not have twins. And you cannot validate that. So you really need to be able to connect and check in with somebody from a similar situation. It's not going to be exactly the same, but like Nick said, they're finishing your sentences. At some point, you will circle around and be in a very similar situation. In Canada, we might be a little further behind. We do have CISM teams that are available. I do know that, and again, in Canada, the fire department and the emergency services are completely separate entities. So we have to work with a number of organizations. We have to connect with the police, which are there on their own. We have the fire departments on their own. We have paramedics on their own. We have dispatchers on their own. Multiple organizations. And what we are really trying to focus on right now is, even though you're from a different organization, everybody needs to talk to somebody. So let's create a structure and an organization where you can call one number and then branch off to the proper section that you need to speak to.
So you're in the process of organizing this. Is that what I'm hearing here?
Yes, I'm not personally a part of the organization. I just know that is something that is evolving. But there are a number of organizations like the one that Stacy's involved with that are supporting peer support for emergency services.
Great. That's fantastic to hear, Jordy. And, I run a support group, so I can certainly talk about it. But I'm actually wondering if one of you would like to address, because quite honestly, I think there's people out there that have never been in a support group or a peer support group, and there really is a power to group. And I'm wondering if one of you would like to answer, what is it about group that actually does help? It really does help. And what do you think that is? Maybe Stacy, do you have any idea?
Yeah, there's a concept called universalization, and that is the realization that I'm not the only one that has intrusive images. I'm not the only one who can't sleep at night. I'm not the only one that has a short fuse, and this is what we hear from first responders. And so whereas, they may think there's something wrong with them, then they realize that, wow, other first responders are having the same symptoms that I am. It's not me. Maybe the job has a wear and tear effect on me. What can I do about that? So I know that that's what you get in a group. You don't get that in individual therapy or one-on-one discussion. So.
Exactly.
Well, Nick, I was going to just add to that and ask you your perspective on this. Because one of the things that I've found as a participant in a peer support group is that you get exposure to information that you would probably never get elsewhere. It's a nice forum to share about different hacks and tips and wellness techniques. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think coping mechanisms in general is always an evolving process for me. And what worked at one point in my career, might not work anymore. So, having the opportunity to get ideas from other people in the group, you can get the inspiration for it. The other part of it that I think is important too is by attending one of these groups on some type of disciplined regular interval, there's an opportunity for accountability. I know, if I make it every Friday, let's say, to peer support, that is going to force me to take an opportunity to be accountable to myself. How have I been managing my stress and symptoms in the last week? And, it gives you a regular point of reflection to take time out of your day. Our peer support group runs for about 2 hours, and, that's a pretty significant chunk of time to dedicate to wellness. It's probably 200% more than most people in the EMS field dedicate on a regular basis. So I think it's good to have it on a regular interval, and it forces us to kind of check in and take stock of where we're at.
And the other thing is that the participants, not just the therapists, they get to know you and they get to give you feedback and say, you seem so much lighter and you're smiling a lot more. And then there's always the congratulations if someone is a month sober, if someone's 8 months sober, whatever the case may be. You get that feedback. It's like you have your own cheering squad, and that can be very inspiring. And it's coming from your peers. It's one thing if your therapist says, "I think you're doing a good job." It's something else if your peers are saying it to you. So.
The best analogy that I can give, if I needed to explain to someone what is peer support like, who's never experienced it before, the most succinct way I can explain it is if you've been involved in emergency services for any period of time, at some point you've probably had an encounter, probably in the station kitchen, where you had the right group of people there and they kind of said the right things to you at the right time. And I really feel like a peer support group kind of reflects when things go really well at the kitchen table and you have those opportunities to share stories and give feedback and give support. I think we've kind of taken that process and standardized it and said, we're going to do this on a regular interval. But that's the closest anecdote I can give is, when things really go well and you're reflecting back at the station with a good group of people you trust. That's what I think for the most part is duplicated in our peer support groups.
Cool.
Yeah.
Jordy, I know you've been deployed for extended periods of time with the same group. Is that correct?
Yeah. So for the last almost 10 years, I've been part of EMAT, which is the Emergency Medical Assistance Team of Ontario, which is a 56-bed mobile ICU hospital that can be set up anywhere in the province of Ontario within 24 hours of receiving the call. If you've seen the TV show MASH, that's very similar that's the best way to describe what we do, with most of the joking that happens on that show as well. But the great thing about living, eating, sleeping, and working closely with a great group of people is that there's no barriers that you need to try and break down. If you have a hard day, you're having a tough time, they will probably call you out and let you know that before you actually realize that you're having an off day. And that's something that you don't find in a lot of places, in a lot of services. But that's that close connection because we are doing so much for such a long period of time. And just to clarify, that 4 months was, it was 6 weeks here, 6 weeks there, for a total of 4 months over the year. So it makes it that much longer because you come home, you're home for a couple of weeks and the phone rings and you're gone again.
Do you find that level of connection and closeness with each other actually makes you a more powerful group in terms of, reacting to emergencies and helping the people that do come in for help?
100%. Yeah, we just operate at almost like at a higher level than I would in my traditional job. In my traditional job, the support is not the same because you're only working with one or two people for a few shifts at a time. So you don't have that consistency of the same people around all the time. when we're away, our management team is with us as well. So that we have the support from our management team. Whereas where I work currently, the management team is usually working out of a headquarters, and you can still connect with them, but it's more difficult to have those intimate relationships to work through situations if you have them.
Thank you for sharing that, Jordy. You did bring us a song, and it's a music video. I wonder if you could just say a few words about it to set it up, and then we'll play it.
Absolutely. So a few months ago, I was asked by one of our friends, Maureen Pollard, who is a social worker in Ontario, and we have done a number of projects together and speaking engagements in the past. And she wanted to write a song to create awareness about PTSD and how can we get more support for our first responders. She connected with somebody named Murray Foster, who again is a Canadian musician. You may or may not have heard of the band Great Big Sea, but he is instrumental in that band. And so with Maureen writing the song and Murray putting the music to it, I was asked to connect with different first responder organizations across Canada. And we were able to collect a number of images and video clips. And so together, we were able to put this video together to help create awareness for first responders.
Great, let's take a look and a listen.
It's 3 in the morning, I've been awake for hours, haunted by what happened, and sleep doesn't have the power to release me from the grip of the sights and smells and sounds. If I manage to drift off, I jolt awake as my heart pounds. I did everything I could, doesn't seem like it's enough. I did everything you should, still I'm feeling pretty rough. Thinking over every step I took or didn't take. What if I'd done something different? What difference would it make? It shouldn't be, but here we are. How can it be? It's just so hard. They say I'm strong. Please make me strong enough to bear these tragedies. They call me brave. Please make me brave enough to face each coming day. The ship's all on. And I've seen things no one should ever see, but I'm no hero. I just do my job, then carry on my way. When the sun comes up and this restless night ends, I head in for my shift. Duty calls, the master sends. And in the quiet moments when I find myself alone, memories rush back, imagine sins I can't atone. They say I'm strong. Please make me strong enough to bear these tragedies. They call me brave. Please make me brave enough to face each coming day. The ship's all on. I've seen things no one should ever see, but I'm no hero. I just do my job, then carry on my way. I'm no hero. I just do my job, then carry on my way.
Very cool.
That was
Thanks for sharing that,
great.
Jordy.
Yeah, happy that we were able to show it.
Excellent. So, Nick, with daily adversities and so much stressors on the job, is there a call that can really trigger an emotional response, like a really big emotional response? Like a particular call, let's say?
I think it's difficult to predict what is going to affect you in what way. And I think it changes throughout your career. That's the temptation is to think, oh, well, it's just calls that reach the level of a 9/11 or a Sandy Hook that really will cause people to be unhinged. When really we know that, our response to tragedy and malevolence is highly individualized. It's highly related to circumstance, even sensory information. I could describe several calls that I went on that were, by objective measurements, terrible, tragic, bloody, that I can tell you in very, plain details what happened, and it doesn't inspire any type of emotional response. And I've got other calls that, again, by compared to those same measures, aren't as severe, but, really, cause me to feel something kind of in the pit of my stomach. And it's just difficult to predict that. So, if I was advising someone going into EMS, one of the things that I would tell them is, say, listen, you don't exactly know which calls are going to, inspire or invoke, a particularly bad response from you. You need to be aware of that. Don't think that just because you didn't go to Sandy Hook or 9/11 that you can't be affected by the calls you go on.
Yeah. Wow.
Let's shift a little bit into some of the ways we can measure stress and maybe even take some steps or have some tools to help us de-stress and calm down. Stacy, we've heard about this term heart rate variability and the coherence. Can you talk a little bit about that, what it is, what it means,
Sure.
and how we can get some mastery over it?
Yes. So everyone's heard of heart rate, right? It's how many beats per minute for your heart. So oftentimes you go to the doctor, the nurse will check your pulse in a 15-second interval, and then times that by 4, and your heart rate is 70. All right, so that would be a healthy heart rate. But heart rate doesn't tell us a lot about the autonomic resilience or health, the health of your autonomic nervous system, and that's really your blood pressure, your heart rate in general across time. So heart rate variability is a little different measure in that it's the time between beats, if that makes sense. So if we do a little math here, if there's 0.6 seconds between beats, you're going to have 100 beats per minute. If there's 1.2 seconds between beats, you're going to have 50 beats per minute. Okay. And so then what does that mean? Why do we care about that? Why do we care about how that varies across time? Okay, so there's and this is best explained, using a little chart here. So heart rate variability, when you look at the top here in red, this is a very sawtooth pattern. So time starting here going across time, you can see that it's very jagged. It's incoherent. So when people are frustrated, the beat to beat shift in your heart rate pattern is all over the place. Okay, so that sawtooth pattern shows no coherence to it whatsoever. Okay, when someone is in this frame of mind and they have incoherent heart rate variability, they are in a state of frustration, anxiety, worry, irritation. Okay. On the other hand, when someone has a coherent heart rate variability, there's a smooth pattern to it. Okay, so it doesn't matter that it actually goes high and low. You see the peaks and the valleys, as long as it happens in a healthy, coherent fashion. So the autonomic nervous system, the way that your heart functions is healthier if it's in a coherent pattern. What we find with people that have PTSD, people who are in high stress jobs, they're kind of hanging out in this, okay? And so what's the downside to this? Let's just talk a little bit about that. The downside to that is it's very hard to think. It's hard to concentrate when you're in heart rate variability incoherence, all right? You feel stressed typically. Your blood pressure is going to be higher. It's hard to digest. It's very difficult to sleep. So there's the Heart Math Institute, and you can look this up, you can Google it. In fact, it's heartmath.com. If you want the research on the Heart Math Institute, it's heartmath.org if you want to see some of their research, and they have a lot of research to support doing these exercises. There's a certain exercise program. It involves breathing. It's not complicated. There's 2 steps to it, getting yourself into that slow breathing pattern that I introduced, during the 4 elements exercise. But then part 2 being focus on your heart and generate a feeling of gratitude or appreciation. And if you can do that, you're going to provoke a coherent heart rate variability. And that's really what you want, because when you're in this type of a heart rate variability pattern, the benefits of that are you tend to feel more appreciative. Your attitude is more positive. Your mood is better. You're able to concentrate, and you're also able to sleep. People who spend more time in high heart rate variability coherence they'll digest food better. They will heal from injuries better. Cortisol tends to be reabsorbed, and it doesn't just hang out in your bloodstream, because there's really wear and tear effect on the inside of your arteries with atherosclerosis requires cortisol. So the HeartMath Institute puts out a free app called Inner Balance, and you can download it on your iPhone and on Android. And then there's an ear sensor that you clip. It's a very sensitive ear sensor, and it plugs right into your phone, okay? And you actually can have biofeedback on your phone, biofeedback information. And it's very easy to read. You don't have to be a neuroscientist to understand, because the app will show you that if you're in high heart rate variability, if you're in a high coherence, it'll be green. If you're on your, if you're kind of, middle stage, it'll be blue. And if you're stressed out and you have, heart rate variability that's incoherent, it'll be red. And almost everybody in my office, when I hook them up to this device, they start out in red. And then we start doing the breathing, do that for about a minute. And then as they shift into blue, I'll say, okay, now I want you to, focus on your heart and think of someone or something that you appreciate. And once they do that, it shifts into green immediately. And it's remarkable. And when you show that to somebody, that like, oh, wow, I have just altered my autonomic nervous system. And I've done this on my own, just by, breathing and, having a focus of appreciation. Then what happens is that the person has to practice, right? This is not a one and done deal. It's not like now, all of a sudden you're going to have high coherence in your heart rate variability. It doesn't happen like that. It takes a lot of practice. So, that app is available free from the App Store. And then if you go to heartmath.com, you can get the ear sensor. And it's portable, right? So let's say, I'm thinking for first responders, you come off of a bad call, you can actually sit with this and calm yourself down. It's going to be red when you first turn it on. You do the exercise, and then you can shift yourself into green. And you know that it doesn't get any better than that. Like, that is the best frame of mind to be in order to handle your next call. So,
that's great. Yeah, maybe someday apparatus will come outfitted with the HeartMath app.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, definitely.
That and really practice really is the key. When you keep doing that, right? Doesn't your brain calms down faster because yeah, that's right. We're doing that deep breathing thing now, or the 4 elements.
The neurons that fire together wire together. That's the saying these days. The neuroplasticity of the mind is real. You can change the way that your brain functions if you do a repeated activity, whether it's good or bad. You could say something bad about alcohol. If you repeatedly put alcohol in your system in order to calm yourself down, you're going to generate, some neural pathways that are not in your favor. If you were to meditate or, practice heart math, the inner balance, using the inner balance app or 4 elements, and you did that, let's say you did it before bed. Great time to do it because you're then shifting into, a frame of mind and a frame in a body state that is conducive to sleep. Or maybe do this before you come home from your shift if you're a first responder, so that you can be present, for your family.
To your wife. Or husband.
Maybe you can speak to that, Tamara.
That's another show on itself.
That's a whole nother hour.
The Dave and Tamara show.
Happily married, happily married, happily married.
Oh boy. It's so great listening to all of you with your amazing experience and expertise. And oh my gosh, I just want to keep asking Stacy questions and Nick questions, but we really want to ask some other kinds of questions. So Jordy, first responders and grief. So you have difficult calls and these experiences of grief, like Nick was talking about, some really hit you in the gut and some don't. What do you recommend? How do you get through when you're really grieving a really difficult experience on the job?
Yeah, it's a really common question that people are asking, and there's no real concrete solution. It is very individual. The biggest thing is having a community around you, a support system around you. Ideally, you'd like to have that support system in place before you start your career. Realistically, that doesn't happen because you come out of school, you're gung-ho, you're ready to go, you're going to face the world, and you've had your 42-minute lecture in college about how to deal with all of this, and you're on top of the world. And I can remember even over 20 years ago in school, we had 160 people in our program, and after the first week of preceptorship or ride-alongs in school, after that first week, we were down to 90 students because they had no idea what they were getting into. They just saw, you race through intersections and the lights are going and you're a hero and you saved the day, and that person died, and I don't know what to do with this, and I have nobody to talk to. My family's not supportive, my community's not supportive. So the biggest thing is having those tools in place ahead of time, so that, and we use the term just showing up a lot, to the point where we created a movement about it, but showing up for yourself first and having people that you can count on to show up for you and that you can show up for them is probably the most important thing to do. It's not difficult. How do you show up for somebody? Maybe your partner's had a difficult call. Fire off a quick text. Hey, I'm here. If you want to chat, let me know. If you don't, no problem. They may or may not even open that. Right? You can call, you can text, you can send an email, just so people know that you're there is pretty powerful in helping, working through some of those different stages of grief.
Do you think it's hard for some people to actually ask for that kind of support
As a
among
first
their
responder?
peers?
We're all type A, go personalities. Yeah, 100%.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep,
There's,
that's who we are, right? We thrive on the high energy, and for us to say that we are weak, we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to show our emotion, those people are the ones that we tend to see don't make it through a 40, 50, 60, 70-year career, as a first responder. You need to be able to, submit and say, you know what, I'm not okay. I think I need to figure something out. I need to talk to somebody about it. And that's the first step.
Being humble. There's 2 archetypes, if you want to look into personality variables, right? So who's drawn to become first responders? Warrior archetypes and rescuer archetypes, right? These are the individuals that they themselves don't feel like they need help. They are the helpers. I'm the one who comes in and I effect control in this situation. No matter if you're police, fire, EMS, you've got a job to do. You get in there, you fix it. never do they think, or very rarely do they think, that I'm someone that, needs help, Well, who helps the helper? And the helpers, they themselves have to be, I guess, mature enough, humble enough, not to feel that they are being weak. If, they ask for help. They too, in order to maintain that level of intensity in a work environment, at some point, you're going to need some help, or you're going to have to take care of yourself on a regular basis, meaning, exercise, talk to other people, take time off, engage in fun activities, balance the intensity of your work environment. At least do that.
And Nick, is it fair to say, can we say this out loud? It's reaching out for help is not a weakness.
No, I mean, obviously, the immediate response that I've heard to that same question a million times, and I agree with it, is that's one of the most difficult things that you can do. I'll, give my most recent experience. I was diagnosed with PTSD in 2019, just before the pandemic started. I probably was dealing with symptoms probably for several years, prior to that. But, coming to terms with that was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. So, it is difficult to ask for help. And it's also difficult to have enough self-awareness to realize that, things aren't going as well as they could. Because how do we measure our success? Well, we look at, run forms completed, or, we look at a lot of external things that, other people look at. Well, Nick showed up for work today and he's a good paramedic and took care of his patients. And, I was diagnosed with PTSD in a year where I received 2 awards and published an article in a national journal, and it's like, so to probably in everyone else's view, and I think a bunch of my colleagues and even a few of my, officer supervisors at the department I was working at said, we didn't realize that you were struggling this much. So, we don't always have an easy way of judging just how bad things are. And you get stuck in the day-to-day in the thick of it. When your symptoms come on over time and you get kind of used to dealing with them, you don't realize how much, things could be better.
Yeah, a lot of heads nodding. Yeah.
I've had first responders say, I never realized how off center I was until I started experiencing symptom relief. All right? How effed up I really was. And because they use that phrase, they don't usually say it in politically correct terms. But once they start feeling better in therapy, or a combination of therapy and medication, and life balance, just doing different things to take care of themselves and on their own, not just therapy, and they start feeling better, then they realize, gosh, I was really in a bad way, but it was insidious. I didn't see myself getting to that point. I couldn't feel myself getting to that point, because we all adapt, right? And the other thing I noticed about first responders is that they have such a high pain tolerance, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain. It's unbelievable. And so they're very late to the game to getting help. First responders are not necessarily proactive individuals. It's very rare for me to get a first responder that it isn't really symptomatic when they come into the office.
To Stacy's point there, I've always thought to myself, what are the barriers to people speaking up before they need help? I mean, as clinicians, as paramedics, we lecture our patients all the time. Why didn't you call us 2 days ago when you were having problems with your blood pressure? Yeah. Now you're having a stroke and it's going to be a lot worse. So, I think part of the reason why so many people wait to ask for help is obviously what we've talked about so far, is just not realizing how bad they are. But I think the other issue is we do a terrible job of initiating responders about the profound effect that this job can have on you. So we don't really do a good job of explaining to new first responders exactly how difficult this job is and what it demands of you, we kind of do the exact opposite. We kind of brush it off, and first responders are too humble about the work that they do. And we have this constant back and forth, like people don't like the attention, thank you for your service and that kind of thing. And it feels awkward. Like when people say that, like, I don't want to have any part of that, because, people can't possibly understand what it's actually like until you're in one of those situations. So it's, they can try to empathize, but they're not going to really understand what it is, the sensory overload and the sights and smells and everything. They just won't get that. So that doesn't feel good. But where the issue comes is, if we brush off recognizing how profound our work is, we don't realize how important it is to optimize our performance going into it. So, if you really look at the job we're endeavoring to do, it's nuts. You talk to, we talked about people like in the special forces, and they say, we tell them, okay, so we're going to have a mission for you, but we're not going to tell you when it is, where it is, who's going to be there, or what you're going to do. And then the tones drop, and it's, you're going to this house to do something. So, if you really actually sit down and look at the mission that we're trying to do, it's completely nuts, and if you accept that what we're trying to do is one of the most difficult jobs on the earth, and you ask yourself, what do I need to do to prepare to perform at that level? Then you have a completely different conversation. The conversation is, I need to eat right. I need to exercise. I need to optimize my sleep. And you start looking at it from this perspective of, if we recognize how difficult the things we are trying to do actually are, then that should motivate us to proactively be optimizing our own performance. Like, no, you're not going to, go, be a quarterback for the Patriots and, sit around on the weekend, drinking beer and watching TV. I know there are sports psychologists now that their only job is to counsel professional and semi-professional athletes about the psychology of performing under pressure. Obviously that's not we don't have that kind of resource available to us, but you can imagine how important that would be. And, so I think one of the keys is we need to do a better job of hyping up or really explaining to even first responders themselves how profound their work is. And I wouldn't do that to, again, try to congratulate people and, pat each other on the back. I think if you're not naive, and that's what happens. I think a lot of people, I started in this field at 16. I was incredibly naive. And, a lot of what trauma is you become unnaive. You have that naivete smashed by tragedy and malevolence. And suddenly you realize that this is actually a very difficult job. And there's really no way to perfectly prepare for it. But, I think once you accept that this job is insanely difficult to do on, it's physically demanding, it's mentally demanding, it's emotionally demanding. The training requirements are, absolutely, time consuming and overwhelming. If you start to really appreciate exactly how difficult this job is, and you're honest with yourself, then as soon as you accept that this job is that dangerous and difficult to do, the next question that it necessitates is asking yourself, okay, how am I going to optimize my own performance? And so I think, and before you can even start talking about strategies for sleeping well, you need to actually convince first responders that this job isn't a joke and it can hurt you. And and there's severe consequences to you showing up not being 100%. So that might be the other motivator there. Say, listen, you're kind of performing at a level of just getting by right now, but you should be striving to be exceptional. This is, a field where we need to have a high degree of perfection and excellence at all times. There's, all kinds of jokes about, no one calls the fire department and, or when people call the fire department, they expect a team of brain surgeon decathlon athletes to show up and solve their problems within
And
2 minutes.
Electricians, plumbers, air conditioning, mechanics, you name it.
Absolutely. So before we can even start talking about wellness, we have to convince people to acknowledge, and for some people that's impossible because they're just too new in the job and they haven't gotten harmed by it. And the other thing is, a lot of times I feel like my coping mechanisms and the coping mechanisms of people that are new to the field are accidental. They're in a circumstance in life where they're only working EMS 40 hours a week, and they have a great support system at home. They don't have a lot of out of work stressors. They're naturally athletic or something like that. And those people don't have a problem. They don't end up with the symptoms of PTSD because they have those coping mechanisms there accidentally. And then life happens, and you had kids or a second job, and some normal life stressors, and suddenly those weekends that you spent fishing or gardening aren't there, and you're working an extra job because you're trying to pay for your kids' college or something. You take away those effective natural coping mechanisms, and then you need to start to do intentional things like meditating at work.
A lot of amazing information, Nick, and thank you for sharing all of that with us. We're going to wrap up now and just ask you all to say a little bit about where people can find you, and we'll start with Jordy. Just let us know again about your movement and your mission.
Sure. So together with my wife, Yvonne, we co-founded an organization called Love Your Life to Death, which is teaching people to plan and prepare for grief and life's challenges before they arrive. So you have those coping skills, you have those tools in that toolbox that you can draw from when you need to. The second part of that, which was sort of a spin-off, which is almost now our mainstream thing, is our I Just Showed Up movement. So our bracelets that we have. So I Just Showed Up, teaching people to show up for themselves first, to be the best version of themselves, and being able to show up for somebody else, to be that support system when they don't know where else to turn. So you can learn more about all of our stuff at loveyourlifetodeath.com.
Thank you, Jordy. And Nick, where can folks find you out there, and what are you up to?
The best place to find me right now is through the YouTube channel that I manage for the company I work for. On YouTube, search for Vintech Management Services. Up to date, we've been posting a lot of very specific clinical information, but as a way of kind of an announcement, we have launched our own podcast. It's going to be called the EMS Careers Podcast. I'll be hosting that starting in July. Every Thursday, we'll be releasing a new interview that'll focus on some aspect of career development, longevity, and provider wellness. So check us out on YouTube.
Fantastic. And Stacy, you want to talk a little bit about Responder Wellness?
Sure. Well, first you can find me if you wanted to find my my website. It's drstacyraymond.com. For the nonprofit charity Responder Wellness Inc. That's responderwellness.org. You can also find us on Facebook if you just type in Responder Wellness Inc. So that's how you can locate me and what I'm doing.
Thank you. We appreciate you all so much for showing up for this amazing conversation. We could go on for hours and dive deeper and deeper into any one of these subjects, but I think we covered some very, very pertinent stuff, and you're all doing amazing work out there. We appreciate you and applaud you for everything you're doing out in the world.
Thank you so much for showing up. It's really a very important conversation we're having here.
Thank you, Tamara. David, bringing this to the public is critical. So,
thank you all for joining us on our premiere episode of Responder Resilience, and we look forward to seeing you again on another episode.
All right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.